You've heard it before. What gets measured gets managed. But what if I told you how you report on what gets measured can completely transform how your agency operates? Let me show you how. In this video, I'll be walking you through 5 use cases that every agency should be using for Notion charts. Each of these charts are going to give you a brand new insight, and we're going to be reporting on the data that you already have inside of Notion. Reporting on your finances can not only give you a great handle on your cash flow, it can help you pick up on trends and forecast for the future. So the first chart or set of charts that I want to show you live inside of my financial tracker. And you can see them at the top here, but first of all, just to explain the information that's captured inside. We have an income database, and essentially this has been synced to or integrated with my Stripe's payouts. And so every time I get a successful payment from Stripe, I have a make automation that then sends that information directly into this income database. I have a few other databases like tracking any disputes, my expense categories, my regular expenses, but most importantly, we have this very simple income database that shows expected collection, the date of collection, the amount, and a few other items in here. So now I have this database that's very simple to set up. Here are the Notion charts. And the first one I have is this line graph that essentially is going to show me how much money I'm making month to month. And obviously, hopefully that being growing each month. And the way I created this is essentially, if we come to the 3 dots here, of course, the layout is a chart, and the chart type I've gone with is line. And then the data source is that income database that I just showed you. And so essentially what I'm showing along the x-axis is the collection date property, and I'm grouping that by month. And then along the y-axis, I'm showing the amount property, and I'm obviously summing up the amount property. So essentially each month it's finding records that have that date, and then it's also finding the amount property and summing that up, so I can see that in September, for example, I made 8K. If over on your income database as well, you have a way of tracking your services, another option you have here is that you could actually take the sum amount and you could group this by the services, if we find them here. And so now you can see, obviously this isn't quite up to date, but you could actually see how much money you're making month to month based on the different services you're providing as well. And so you can see which of your offerings is making you the most money. The second Notion chart we have here is a bar chart, and this is essentially showing us the status of the income. So we can get a really nice view of what has been paid, and obviously we can show you this by the expected collection date. So if we want to say that it is relative to today, this month, for example, we can just see data for this month or this year. So you can see it at any time scale. And then at the moment I can see I've had 18K already paid. I've had 8K cancelled. But let's say I had some that were upcoming, I could see that. Some that have been paused, refunded, all of that stuff gives you a really nice pulse on all of the different cash flow in your business. To set this up again, we can see we're at the chart type. We've just chosen the vertical bar, and we are using the data source again of the income database. On the x-axis, I'm choosing the status option this time, and down here you can see we have the statuses here. And then also what I have done is on the y-axis, I'm choosing the amount again, and I'm using the sum property. And then the final chart I have in my financial tracker are late payments. And so this time we're actually using a pie or a donut type. And what I have here is the thing that we are showing is anything that has a late payment checked. And so if I come back over to my income database, you actually notice at the very bottom here, I have this formula property. And essentially what this formula property is working out is if the status is not paid, cancelled, or refunded, so it's yet to be paid, and if the collection date is greater than the expected collection, then this is basically going to give this a check of late payment. So based on anything that is a late payment, basically what this pie chart is showing is how many of my people that are paying me are a late payment. So at the moment, this is just showing that out of the total 2 payments I've received, 1 wasn't late. Of course, once I have more information in here, I'd see more things in here as well. So over time, and again, you can group this by whatever collection date you like, but you can basically see out of all of the payments I've had, for example, in the month of June, how many of those were late payments, And if there's a lot of late payments, then you now know you have an issue in your hands and you might want to speak to whoever is in charge of collecting payments, what they can be doing differently. But charts not only helps us report on data, we can also use charts alongside other views to actively review and plan for future work. Let me show you how. So here is my team performance dashboard. And essentially this is collecting a lot of information throughout my workspace and using charts to visualize the data. But unlike the financial tracker, I've created a dedicated page just to put these charts because there's so much good information that I want to glean from this. So you can see this starts with last week's performance at the top here. And the very first chart I have are planned tasks by assignee in a bar chart. So essentially this is a view of my task database and it's in a bar chart form, and along the y-axis I'm showing the assignee, and then along the x-axis I'm showing the assignee, and along the y-axis I'm showing the task count. And I'm also grouping this by the status. So I've got the due date set to the last 1 week, and so basically what I'm seeing here in this information is any tasks that were given the due date of last week or within last week. Show me who was assigned work, how much work they were assigned, and what is the current status of this. So this bar chart very quickly gives me a pulse on who's got the most work and also where are they at with that work. So I can see Sam has 10 pieces or 10 tasks. 3 of those are done, but 7 of them are not started. And that was last week. So Sam's a bit behind. And we have another one, which is a no assignee, but let's say this was assigned to someone like John. He had 13 tasks, so quite a few more tasks. 3 of them were done. 1 of them is actually in client review. 2 of them have been assigned to the client that he's obviously watching or responsible for, and 7 aren't not started. So John has a bit more going on in terms of statuses, but now we can understand where everyone is at. What I've also done here, unlike on the financial tracker as well, is I've added another view, which is a table view. And so basically what this does is it copies the exact settings of the Notion charts, but just shows it in a basic table view. So we can see what the information is here. And then if we need to drill down exactly on what these tasks are, for example, for Sam, now I can see that Sam has to prep for a discovery call. He's got to create a shortlist, got to prep for an onboarding call. And so I can get a bit more granular on how he's doing with each of the tasks. And what I can also do is, for example, if I see that he hasn't started this, I might add to the comments here, how are you getting on with this, Sam? Do you need some help? So on and so forth. So we can use the chart to give us a nice pulse, and then we can switch over to the table view to get a bit more details or to add some comments. So that is the planned task by the week inside this section. We also have 3 more, so planned tasks by status. So we can see how many of our tasks that were planned for last week, what the statuses are overall. We can see completed tasks that have been completed on schedule or not on schedule. So out of the 12 tasks that were completed, 2 of them were on schedule, 10 of them weren't. Again, we're a bit behind, so that's good to know. And then overdue tasks, so how many of these tasks were actually overdue that we did, and who were the people that were assigned to them. So that gives us a pulse on how we did last week. And then we can also look at specifically overdue tasks review. So overdue tasks by assignee, overdue tasks by client, and then again, overdue tasks as a table view so we can get a nice view on this. So if we were doing a weekly review, we'd start with last week's performance. Then we need to see what tasks are overdue. So we might need to move them into next week, or however we like to organize our tasks and our task planning. And then we can move on to this week's priorities. So again, the same view, but for this week. So planned by assignee with the filter to show due date is this week. How many tasks has Sam got? He's got 4. How many has John got, for example? 3. Go into the table, we can organize these, maybe move these around to different assignees and basically plan out our week. So this is just one example of how we can start using Notion charts in dashboard formats for planning or for reviewing. How can we make delegation easier? How can we make sure that everyone on our team doesn't have too much work? And how can we make sure that each of our team members is being used correctly? With 2 words, capacity management. So over on Notion, I have this timesheets dashboard, and this is bringing together quite a few databases. So first of all, we have our client projects database, and we can basically see how much time has been estimated for this client overall and how much has been tracked. Then we have our task database, and we're seeing the exact same thing for the at each task level, how much is being estimated and how much is being tracked. And then finally, we can move over to our actual timesheets database. and we can see our timesheets based on the participant, so the individual time loggings. So for example, on December 17th, I worked on hosting the onboarding call for the ABC co-client project, and I worked for a total of 1 hour. And I can also see, for example, if I was to put the start date to a certain range, I could see how many hours I've logged for a week, for example. So given this time frame, I've worked 61 hours in total, just as an example, and John has worked 120 hours. Then I can move over to timesheets by client project. So I can see, based on the client project, how many hours have been worked. And again, I can see a total of those hours. So again, I could do this for all time, or I could do this particular date range. And then finally, using Notion charts, I can get a really good visual on these timesheets to basically see how much work each of my employees have done. And as you can also see, I'm grouping these by the clients as well. So how much work they've done, but also by each client. And again, I could do this for any time frame. So let's just do relative to this week. And now I can see that Sam's worked 1 hour and John has worked 120 hours, but you get the idea. And by implementing the charts, not only can we visually see how much work each person's doing, so we can work out billable hours and that sort of thing, but we can also get an overall sense of the workload of each team member and how much work each of them has actually done. Assigning metrics to your team is a surefire way to motivate them. But databases with a long list of KPIs can be hard to read, so let's use Notion charts to fix that. So here is my KPIs dashboard and my KPIs database over here. And you can see, first of all, I have a couple of views to show these KPIs, but essentially we have the owner of the KPI, what the KPI is, and then inside of each of these KPIs, we have these KPI logs, so we can log what the different entries were for week to week or month to month. And then overall, we can see that we have week goals, the actual week actual, and then the month goal, and then the month current, as well as a sort of end of month projection. So that's how the KPIs work. But based on this, we can now use Notion charts to create a lovely line chart. And essentially these line charts are showing the progress of each of these KPIs and also grouping them by the KPI. So the way that we've done this is, again, we're showing the KPI logs database, and then over we're choosing the line chart type, and for the x-axis we're using the week commencing properties. This is essentially the date that we input when we log the KPI, as this is the week that this KPI log belongs to. And then the y-axis is the actual number that we input for that KPI log and a sum of that. So basically, if we were logging the KPI every single week, it then is going to sum up for the month. And then finally, on the y-axis as well, we are grouping by the actual KPI itself. So now we can see, for example, our revenue is around this point here, whereas our net profit is progressing like this. And of course, the more information we have in here, the more data we can see for each of the graphs. So that's good for being able to pick out trends and see how each of the different KPIs are doing. What we can also do is, over on the individual KPIs, is add the Notion charts within our actual KPI records using Notion's database templates. So you can see here I have a KPI database template, and if I open this up and hit edit, give myself a bit more room here, you can see we have a few things in the page body, and as well as having the actual logs themselves, we have inputted a chart. And charts can use self-referential filters just like any database can. So I basically have filtered it saying, make sure that this KPI log belongs to this KPI. And so once we have that in practice, if I was to come over to the revenue, I can open this up as a page and I can actually take a look at the line graph and just see the line graph for this KPI. So I can get very granular about the data that I want to be shown per KPI. Finally, sales is really just a numbers game, and knowing your metrics can be what separates a top agency from one that fails. So let's take a look at how Notion charts can help you visually represent each of those metrics. So here we have our CRM Sales dashboard, and we have 3 Notion charts that we've set up. So all of this information is coming from my opportunities database. And this first one is basically showing me, out of the deals that I had available to me, how many were won versus how many were lost. And again, we can use filters to show when the actual opportunities were closed. So I could just see this for how many won this year, or how many were won this month, so on and so forth. So we can see this at any time scale. And the way that this has been set up is we've used the donut chart type. We've decided to use the status option, which is a separate option from our pipeline stage. And the reason I've done this is because over on my opportunities database, if I come here, I actually have several different status options for when someone doesn't close a deal, because I want to know the reason why. And so what I've essentially done is added a second property here in the back end part of this database that basically has the status of open, won and lost. So those simple statuses. And so then what I've also done is added an automation here that basically says when the status or the pipeline stage is set to 1, set the status to 1. But most importantly, when the pipeline stage is set to any of these options, it looks like they were all deleted, but they will be there in the future. So the reasons why we've lost, set the status to lost. And so now when we're over here, we can get a really clear vision of just won versus lost. And then I've also decided to show each slice represented by the expected value. So we're not only seeing the count of how much was lost or how much was won, but we're also seeing how much monetary value was won. The next chart I have here is the revenue by client. And this is a really nice one to see basically who is your most valuable client. So you can see here we have Amazon over whatever, again, time range we would like to do, but let's just keep it all lifetime. We can see that Amazon has given us $1 million worth of value, whereas Acme Co has given us $250,000 worth of value. Sorry, Amazon has given us $100,000 worth of value. And so essentially, yeah, over any time frame, we can see how much value each of our clients has given us. And the way this has been set up is we're showing the data by the related company in our opportunities database. And then each of the slices again represents the expected value. Now, this is just one of the new features that Notion has recently released. So if you want to check out how to use Notion forms within your workspace, check out my 5 use cases for agencies here or here. And of course, if you enjoy this video, please do consider subscribing and liking this video. It really does help. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.